In 1980, George Clare pulls into his garage and is shocked when blood drips on his car windshield. In a panic, he rushes upstairs and finds his daughter, Franny, frozen in place, staring into the distance. He scoops her into his arms and runs out into the open fields. The film then cuts to a few months earlier. George lives in Manhattan with his wife, Catherine, and their young daughter, Franny. During Franny's birthday party, George shares some big news. He has finished his PhD and accepted a teaching position at a private college in upstate New York. Later, Catherine confides in a friend. She is a successful art restorer with a promising future, but she's ready to sacrifice her career to support George's new opportunity. George had struggled professionally and often relied on financial help from his father. Catherine feels she owes it to him now. The next day, the family moves into a large 19th century farmhouse. The home is beautiful but aged, filled with vintage furniture and an old piano. From their very first night, unusual things begin happening. Catherine smells exhaust fumes coming from somewhere in the house. Franny is frightened by a chair moving in her bedroom. She runs into her parents' room and begs to sleep with them. The next morning, George visits the college and is welcomed by Floyd De Beers, the head of the art history department. Floyd has an interest in the spiritual and paranormal. As a gift, he gives George a book titled Heaven and Hell, written by Swedish philosopher Emanuel Swedenborg. Meanwhile, Catherine is visited at the farmhouse by two local brothers, Eddie and Cole Lux. They're looking for work, and Catherine hires Eddie for handyman work and Cole as Franny's babysitter. That evening, while preparing dinner, Catherine finds an old Bible inside the kitchen cabinetry. It contains a family tree of the previous homeowners, the Smiths. Several names are scratched out and marked with the word damn. Soon after, Catherine sees a strange, flickering light in the kitchen. It leads her to a hidden antique ring. When she picks it up, she's overcome by a sudden and unexplainable feeling. Curious about the house's past, Catherine visits the local historical society. There, she learns that Jacob and Ellis Smith were the original owners. She finds a photograph of the couple and continues researching their family history. Meanwhile, George is at the college library, where he meets a young woman named Willis. After a brief conversation, George is seen later pleasuring himself at home, indicating his growing attraction to her. As time passes, George becomes popular among his students and colleagues. He forms a professional friendship with weaving instructor Justine Sokolov. George mentions that he used to be a painter, but claims he gave it up to focus on teaching. That night, Catherine again smells exhaust in the bedroom. George believes it may be coming from the garage underneath and promises to install a fan the next day. But Catherine, frustrated, goes down to the garage to check herself. As she works, she hears the piano upstairs playing on its own. When she investigates, the room is empty. Upstairs, Franny screams after seeing a ghostly woman in her bedroom. Catherine brings her into their bed for the night. The next morning, Catherine finds the Heaven and Hell book and begins reading. Her sense of the supernatural presence in the house intensifies. Later, George jogs past Willis, who is working in a nearby stable. She silently leads him inside, and they begin a sexual relationship. That evening, George brings Catherine a wildflower. She thanks him, but after putting on the antique ring, her attitude shifts, and she coldly throws the flower away. On the road to work, George runs into Eddie and warns him not to tell Catherine that he and Cole once lived in the house. George claims she's too emotionally fragile to handle the truth. At the farmhouse, Catherine continues getting to know Eddie and Cole. She learns that Eddie has musical talent and once hoped to study music in college. That evening, Eddie plays the piano while Catherine listens. George returns home and watches them quietly. Catherine and Franny keep seeing the same female ghost. Outside, vultures begin circling, suggesting a dark energy around the house. Later, George meets Willis again. After another intimate encounter, Willis tells him she's ending the relationship. George tries to convince her otherwise, but she rides away. That night, George and Catherine have dinner at Justine's home. George quickly bonds with Justine's husband Bram over weed. Meanwhile, Justine invites Catherine to join a women's art group. Catherine, who is lonely and isolated, agrees eagerly. On the drive home, Catherine talks about how much she liked Justine, but George mocks her excitement. Driving under the influence, George begins swerving on the road. Catherine gets out of the car in frustration and accuses him of ruining her career. When George grabs her, she falls and bruises her face. He apologizes repeatedly, but she says nothing. Later that night, George tries to comfort her and says he's been neglectful. Catherine listens but remains distant. Their relationship continues to fracture. As weeks pass, Catherine grows closer to Justine, attending art group meetings and finding comfort in their friendship. George, meanwhile, continues to immerse himself in campus life, pretending everything is fine at home. One day, George joins Floyd on a sailing trip. He shares stories about his late cousin Henry, a gifted young artist who drowned at age 19. Later that evening, George invites Floyd over to the farmhouse for dinner. When Floyd arrives, he finds Catherine reading Heaven and Hell. He immediately recognizes the cover image and begins discussing Swedenborg theories. He explains that the artwork symbolizes the soul's journey after death. Catherine shows him around the house, and Floyd quickly senses the presence of a female spirit. He reassures her that the spirit is not harmful, but lingers for a reason. Catherine admits that she once feared the spirit, but now finds it comforting. She believes it is the ghost of Ella Smith. Floyd offers to conduct a seance to help her make contact. The next evening, George and Catherine host a party for their colleagues and neighbors. During the gathering, Catherine learns from a guest that the farmhouse once belonged to Eddie and Cole's family. Their father, Calvin Smith, was financially unstable and abusive to his wife, Ella. One night, Calvin sedated his entire family, slaughtered their livestock, and then started the engines of 2 trucks in the garage. He went upstairs and lay in bed next to Ella until they both died from carbon monoxide poisoning. Catherine is horrified. She finally understands the strange smell in their bedroom and is furious that George never told her the house's full history. Later that night, while smoking with Justine, George makes her uncomfortable by grabbing her hands too tight. When she pulls away, he refuses to let go. Justine becomes angry and leaves immediately. Once the party ends, Catherine confronts George about hiding the truth. He insists he was protecting her from a disturbing history. As they argue, the radio suddenly turns on by itself. George tries to unplug it, but the music continues playing. He smashes the radio in a rage. The following day, George drives Franny to his parents' home. Alone at the farmhouse, Catherine prepares for the seance with Floyd and his colleagues. She presents them with a photo of Ella and shares everything she has experienced. Floyd reveals new information. He had originally believed the spirit was Jacob Smith's wife, who died at 26. She had been a follower of Swedenborg's writings, but Jacob disapproved of her spiritual beliefs. She died under suspicious circumstances in the house. Floyd tells Catherine that many spirits have passed through the home and that it may be more connected to the spiritual realm than she realizes. The seance begins. The group gathers around the table. Catherine places Ella's ring in the center. Candles flicker out and the table begins to shake. The spirit of Ella makes her presence known. Suddenly, a second, more aggressive spirit emerges. It shouts at Ella, forcing her to retreat. The group falls silent. Floyd warns Catherine that another spirit resides in the house, one that has not yet revealed its intentions. He urges her to be careful with the people around her. The next day, Catherine visits the library to return several books. One of them, found in George's car, is overdue. The librarian scans the barcode and tells her the book is checked out under the name Willis. The truth hits Catherine immediately. Her husband is having an affair. Meanwhile, George takes his class on a museum tour at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Justine accompanies them. During the trip, George runs into Dr. Warren, his former dissertation advisor. Dr. Warren is surprised to hear George is teaching, stating that he never wrote a recommendation letter. George lies and says he's just filling in temporarily. Justine overhears the entire conversation. The next day, Floyd confronts George in his office. Dr. Warren had called him. Floyd now knows George forged the recommendation. George confesses and begs for time. Floyd agrees to wait until after the Thanksgiving holiday before reporting him to the administration. On Thanksgiving night, George's parents come to visit. During dinner, his mother shares memories of Henry, George's late cousin, and his art. She recalls how Henry used to paint seascapes and that the family planned to host an exhibition after his death. But all of his paintings mysteriously disappeared. Catherine realizes that the paintings George claimed were his own actually belonged to Henry. Shaken and disgusted, she excuses herself and rushes to the bathroom. George follows, trying to explain. Later that night, George is seen sitting alone in his car with the engine running. He appears lost in thought. A deep, male voice speaks to him. It tells George that it is here to help and urges him to free himself. The next morning, Catherine sits outside the farmhouse looking troubled. Eddie arrives and notices something is wrong. He sits with her and they talk. One thing leads to another, and they begin kissing. Their intimacy grows quickly, and they start an affair. Later, George joins Floyd for a sale, trying to manage the fallout from his forgery. George claims that he was unfairly treated by his former university after reporting a case of misconduct. But Floyd isn't moved. He says forgery is still a crime and makes it clear George will be reported and removed from his position. At a local cafe, Justine spots Willis wearing a scarf she once made for George's mother. The realization hits her. George is having an affair with Willis. That night, George returns to the college campus soaked and agitated. Justine arrives shortly after and confronts him in the parking lot. She accuses him of sleeping with Willis and asks about his conversation with Dr. Warren. George lashes out, telling her to mind her own business. Justine calmly walks away and drives off. Later that night, Justine is driving alone on the highway. George follows closely behind. Suddenly, he forces her off the road. Her car crashes. Back at the farmhouse, Catherine tries to talk to George. She may be planning to leave or discuss divorce, but George brushes her off, claiming he's not in the state of mind to talk. After she leaves the room, George speaks aloud, seemingly to the male spirit. He asks for a sign. That night, a crow crashes through the bedroom window, startling Catherine. George enters and dismisses the chaos, coldly suggesting she get her boyfriend to fix it. The next morning, Catherine sneaks away and drives to Justine's house, hoping to speak with her. There, she learns Justine has been hospitalized after an accident. She's unconscious and in a coma. Doctors are uncertain if she will recover. On the drive back, Catherine hears a breaking news alert on the radio. Floyd De Beers has been found dead in the Hudson River. Shocked and saddened, she realizes how quickly things are falling apart. At the college, George pretends to be devastated by Floyd's death. The faculty, unaware of his involvement, appoint George as interim head of the department. He accepts without hesitation. Later, George enters his classroom and prepares a lecture. But when he turns on the projector, an image appears. The same art from the cover of Heaven and Hell, a symbolic painting of souls moving toward judgment. George tries to turn it off, but it won't disappear. Frustrated, he screams and storms out of the classroom. That evening, George returns home and sees Catherine's packed suitcases inside her car. He understands she plans to leave. He hides his reaction and offers her a protein shake. She drinks it casually, not showing her fear. George asks about Franny. Catherine says she already put her to bed. Suspicious, George checks and finds Franny asleep, fully dressed. He returns downstairs and tells Catherine it's a terrible time to travel. Sensing danger, Catherine tries to flee, but George destroys the phone before she can call for help. He drags her outside, removes her bags from the car, and insists she's not leaving with his daughter. Catherine accuses him of killing Floyd and harming Justine. George denies it and calls her unstable. He leaves her outside and goes back inside the house. Catherine, struggling to stay conscious, begins to feel dizzy. The shake was drugged. She stumbles back into the house and tries to reach Franny. She pleads for help. Ella's spirit appears and guides her. Catherine reaches Franny's room, but finds it empty. She collapses onto the bed and tries to make a call. The male spirit returns and drags her away. George enters the room holding an axe. He hesitates. Ella's spirit warns him that no one who serves evil wins. The male spirit urges him to act. George, crying and shouting, brings down the axe and kills Catherine. The next morning, Cole arrives at the farmhouse as scheduled. He finds a handwritten note from George, stating that Catherine isn't feeling well and shouldn't be disturbed. Cole quietly begins his babysitting duties, unaware of what has happened inside the house. Later that day, George returns home from the college. He enters the house, walks upstairs, and pretends to discover Catherine's body in bed. He screams, appearing distraught. The police arrive shortly after. They find Catherine's body and George's axe nearby. Suspicious, they question him, but George claims he was teaching all day. The college verifies his alibi. With no physical evidence linking him to the murder, the authorities have no choice but to release him. George takes Franny and moves into his parents' house in Connecticut. The investigation goes cold. Meanwhile, Justine remains hospitalized, but the combined spirits of Ella and Catherine begin to manifest around her. In the silence of her hospital room, her eyes suddenly open. She remembers everything. Later, she calls George's parents home and leaves a message. Calmly and clearly, she says she knows what he did. George listens to the message, terrified. Later, as he showers, Calvin's spirit speaks to him again. The voice tells George that everything was Catherine's fault, that she was weak, that she tried to stop him from becoming who he was meant to be. It tells him to run before it's too late. George panics. He drives to the harbor and boards his cousin Henry's old sailboat. He unties it and drifts into the open sea, hoping to escape everything. But a storm begins to build. Lightning flashes in the distance. Fire seems to rise around the boat. George looks around, disoriented and afraid. Suddenly, Ella and Catherine's spirits appear to him. They warn him. The gates of hell are only visible to those who are about to enter. George tries to turn the boat around, but it's no use. The flames close and die. In the sky, an upside-down cross appears, the same image from the Swedenborg book. George disappears into the inferno. He is damned,